I'm looking forward to your session, so let's go.
Is it us? We're away.
Yeah, we are. Go for
it. E aku nui e aku rahi tēnā rā koutou katoa. E rere ana ngā whakaaro kia rātou mā kua whetūrangitia, koutou kua ngaro atu I te tirohanga whatu, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Rātou kia rātou, ara ko tātou te hunga ora kia tātou. He mihi kawana ki ngā mōrehu e mau tonu nei te wairua o te whenua nui nei, koutou katoa ngā iwi, ngā hapua, ngā whānau, huri noa te motu, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Ko ōperu, ko poho te rangi ngā maunga, ko repurua, ko motu mako, ngā aua, ko Ngāti Rangi, ko te whānaua tapuhi, ngā hapu, he wiwi Ngāti tēnei e mihi atu ana kia koutou. Huri noa te motu, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Talo whalawa, malo elelei kia orana, bulavanaka, warmest of greetings to you on this wintry day as we gather to engage in deep conversations about what it is to lead as part of the creative ecology of Aotearoa, here nestled in the heart of Te Moana Nui Ākiwa. Thank you for making time in your busy lives to tune in. It's so good to have this special time together to Korero with you today. For whānau who appreciate a little bit of scene setting, I am a papatuanuku shaped woman with long hair doing its best to become silver, with a moho kauai on my chin. I'm wearing a black dress, black jacket, a turquoise scarf and shark's teeth earrings topped in pounamu. My pronouns in English are she, her, and in te reo, ko ia if you're talking about me, ko au, ko koe if you're talking to me, and ko au if I'm talking about myself. Never advised. Fun fact, there are 26 personal pronouns in te reo Māori, and every single one is gender neutral. So that gives you a little insight into mātauranga Māori, but I digress. Let's have a closer look at this image on the screen. So nau mai ki taku kāinga tūturu. This is an image of our tipuna whare, Tūauau, located northeast of Ruatoria in a place called Repurua. The image is captured from a haukainga perspective, looking toward the door and the light outside. You can tell it's first thing in the morning because no one's made their beds yet. And they would have just likely taken off next door because somebody screamed parakuihi, you know, from the dining hall. This is the epicentre of our world as Ngāti Rangi people. This is the place where I gazed upon the faces of my tipuna kuia and dreamed of moho kauai. The tipuna who carved the path that we tread, adorn all the walls and all of their beautiful frames. They left their creative brilliance behind for us to adore with our eyes and our hands. Their whakairo, tukutuku, and kōwhaiwhai constantly reminding us who we are and who we come from. Whenever I look and wherever I look, our whānau are everywhere, even right next to me stealing the blankets. This is where my journey as a creative started, lying next to my nanny, asking hoha questions right into the middle of the night about everything that I could see in this whare. She would patiently answer every question I asked. This is where my earliest memories of toi are. In the kōwhaiwhai above me, the tukutuku behind me, outside, embedded in the whakairo. This is where I find shelter from the world that white supremacy built. This is where I feel most at home, where I can be myself and imagine a very different reality for Aotearoa. The one that Te Tiriti o Waitangi imagined when my tipuna kraua went along to the hui to sign. As Taina indicated yesterday, this is the domain of rongo. And while the peace is often shattered by the snorchestra in the middle of the night, this is the place where I found my voice as a wahine Māori, as a young kōrero, reciting karakia at 5 a.m. in the morning after the tap, tap, tap on the wall. singing waiata with my nanny and papa and the rest of the whānau. These are the places that nurture the truest sense of our creative self, and they bolster us as we head out into the world. In this place, when you're lying down on the mattress in the middle of the night, you go to sleep, yes, to the snorkestra, but also to the sound of tangaroa outside. I went into labour on that mahau. I breastfed my children in this whare just as my mother and grandmother did before me. In this image, I can see that no, everybody's bolted out of bed because somebody started the generator and there's actually hot water for a shower. This is the place where I feel most at home. This is where I seek refuge. So, this next image, it's one of 9 sheets attached to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which was signed by approximately 579 rangatira. This count includes the 39 who signed the English version by accident, actually, because the missionaries forgot to pack the Māori version. They signed it after an impromptu translation on the spot, which means those missionaries must have had a pretty good command of our reo. This is the East Coast sheet, yellowed with faded marks and writing denoting which mark belongs to who. If you look closely, the far right side of the sheet, 3 from the bottom, you can see the marks of tō mātou tipuna, Kuia Uru Te Rangi and Rawiri Rangikatia, 2 of who, together with Awarau, signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi at Rangitukia on the 1st of June 1840. For us as mokopuna of those who signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the commitments made by all parties are deeply personal. We will not rest until we see the exchanges promised in Te Tiriti honoured and our tipuna vision of peaceful coexistence realised. The comments and the commitments made by them enabled the Queen's right to kāwanatanga or governance on the basis that our right to live as Māori, in accordance with our own mana, was not only understood, but was upheld and protected. From their rangitukia-centred worldview, the idea that many forms of mana coexist was as normal as breathing. And in the future, they imagined their many mokopuna flourished as a consequence of their signing Te Tiriti o Waitangi in good faith. What they didn't potentially anticipate until much too late was the bad faith dealings of the Crown, who, unlike our tipuna, had no appetite for the idea of sharing power. In fact, back in 1840, scholars such as Carl Linné had already established a taxonomy of race that dehumanised people of colour. In England, women and children were considered to be chattels of men and had no legal standing or legal rights of their own. By then, the world had experienced 200 years of the doctrine of discovery, which in essence, the doctrine of discovery promulgated the idea of the superiority of the Christian faith and brought with it death and destruction through colonisation worldwide. It would be fair to say that at this time, white supremacy was raging all around the world. And the jury is still out on what the real reason is for negotiating a Te Tiriti-based approach here in Aotearoa. There are some who say we got a Te Tiriti-based approach because the English were broke after colonising India. There are others who say that the Church Missionary Society was so influential that this Te Tiriti-based humanistic approach won out on the day. Either way, the death and destruction followed anyway. After Te Tiriti was signed, this period of land wars began. I should say land wars. Because actually, colonial troops marching on the homelands of iwi and hapu all over the motu for a decade at least, quickly followed by laws and policies which set out to outlaw our language and our culture. That doesn't seem like war much, does it? Looking back from 2021, we can see clearly all around us the impact of that in the stats, in the well-being of the people, in all of the problems that we're trying to solve today. And yet, if you look really hard at the idea of white supremacy, it's quite preposterous. The idea that someone is inherently better or worse based on their colour of their skin, I mean, that wouldn't stand up to scientific scrutiny today. And yet so many of us have this idea ingrained within our subconscious. In fact, we have, in so many ways, subconsciously accepted this mindset. The good news is, though, that our world is shifting, and it's turning towards this vision of Te Tiriti o Waitangi that our tūpuna first dreamed of 181 years ago. Bright spots are appearing on the horizon to show us what it looks like when everything is as it should be. Let me show you. Have a look at this clip.
What about you? Right after this clip.
Korero e wawatana e whakaro ana no te teikaupapa pēnei, te whakahui-hui i ngā rangatahi, o tō mātou kāinga o te teirawhiti nei, i te mea, huenei te kai ngākau a ngā rangatai, ara, ko te waiata.
So there's 24 of us in the whole tira, and then there's 6 of us known as Te Rōpū Rangatira. So we're the tuakanas of the whole Rōpū, and we sort of help Rob and Sala lead everything, and we delegate. So they've been steering this whole kaupapa for us for the Tarawhiti Festival. That's what we're leading up to.
Nā reira e whakarongi, e whakatūria tētahi tira waiata, ai kauhau atu mā te waiata, tēnei mea te oranga. Mā roto i ngā pau e toru, whakapono tūmanako me te aroha.
Manakia!
Kei te kite i tā rātou apanuitanga, tā rātou Ngāti Porautanga, ue pohatutanga, tai rā anō ki ngā mea ko peka mai i Ngāti Kahungunu.
Singing Ātira nei is all about the blend, you know, all about that one sound, you know, with hakas, you've got sounds going everywhere, just
even though I don't mind going, you know, full blast.
Some of the kaiwata that really stand out for me, personally, are Kai Hills.
Speechless. Speechless.
He's pretty much, I'm gonna say like the manawa of the Rōpū.
Well, could you make a photo shoot?
Yeah, nei.
Why not?
Koe te anaki. Nā, ko kraua kia waha.
Yeah.
Nā rangatahi kia.
Yeah, well, my whole life's a bit of a photo shoot. Nah, but yeah, I've been practicing my faces.
Either looking right into this or looking just above my head.
Ko te theme tuatahi, ko te autumn clothes, so ki te ngā kōwhai, ki ngā karaka. Our second look was a more formal look. We had whites and blacks. Our tongas, it was a cool experience, first experience for most of us.
Photo shoots, yeah, it's photos really.
Almost got blown off a mountain, washed off a beach, and got stuck in a lot of mud. But hey, it's fine. We all looked beautiful at our photo shoot, and yeah, Thank you. Ka kite!
Ready? No mai te piti. Fly like a butterfly, sting like Kahal.
Oh, you got it.
How awesome was that? And look, all of their YouTube videos that follow their journey from 2019 are up on YouTube. So just Google Kahal plus YouTube and you'll find the whole lot. It's pretty amazing. So this beautiful kaupapa is just one example of what's possible when we hold space for rangatahi Māori to bring their creative energy to the fore, rather than apply old models of working with young people. This way of working recognises their whakapapa, their inherent mana, and creates space for that to coexist and then for co-creation to begin. All they needed to get underway was for someone to gather them up, work with them, create a platform for their creative output. Between Rob and Silaruha and their creative colleagues, these beautiful souls have been supported to do what they do best, with their mana intact. Kahal performed for Te Tairāwhiti Arts Festival from Raukokore to Tiki Tiki in Tūranga and Manutuke to audiences who literally held our breath with every note they sang. I tangi te ngākau, I te aroha. But their aspirations and their mahi didn't stop there. After their inaugural performance, well, actually, that was just the beginning. Kahal have gone on to dive even deeper into the music industry with Rob and Sila's support, providing backing vocals for a gospel album last year. And this year, their album is due to drop any minute and we are all hanging out. Their future is bright because significant adults in their community believed in their creative potential, invested time and energy in supporting them to grow that. But most importantly, recognised the value of their being fully grounded in who they are and where they come from. At a time when so many of our beautiful rangatahi are struggling. Kaupapa like this may well be the difference between life and death for some. So my question to us, e Huama, as board chairs, as chief executives, as creatives, how much space do we hold for rangatahi in our kaupapa? How willing are we to hold that space so that they can grow and flourish, just like these ones have? And you know, how often in our board meetings do we ask ourselves questions like, what has been the rangatahi experience of working with us as an organisation? How have they experienced us? Has our manaaki been on lock? Have they grown and flourished as a result of their engagement with our organisation? These are important governance questions for us to ask. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity when all the board chairs come together later in the year to actually engaging in this kind of kōrero. So, kaupapa like Kahal are proudly and undeniably Māori. The ability to recognise and hold ever so lightly the mana of people is a highly prized trait of leadership in te ao Māori, very, very much respected. And as you can see, the results are magical. You know, I can't hear those kids sing or even call up a memory of them singing without wanting to cry. And when I pause and reflect and ask myself, why is that? I'm not a tangiweto. Why do I cry every time these blooming kids sing? The answer is very simple. The Māori is different when our kaupapa comes from the hearts of our mokopuna. We saw this with Libby Hakaraia's sharing of their rangatahi kaupapa yesterday. If you can quiet your brain long enough and tune into your ngākau, authenticity can be felt, it can be discerned. I know for me, when I hear our kids in full flow, in tune with their creative energy, doing their thing, loving it, I know that they are that true reflection of what my great-great-great-grandfather imagined when he sign Te Tiriti o Waitangi. These beautiful rangatahi, in full command of every aspect of their reo, their EQ, their IQ, in fact all the Qs, they are clearly visible when they can just be who they are. It's not unreasonable either to expect that for those of us who have been here in Aotearoa for 40 generations, that we might expect to experience this on the daily. Sadly, we know that this is not the case. And for many Māori, it remains a struggle on many, many levels. In a world still working to shake off racism and colonisation, there are some in our creative whānau who struggle to see the value of by Māori for Māori approaches, by rangatahi for rangatahi approaches, by Samoa for Samoa approaches, by Tonga for Tonga approaches. There are some who see the value but want to remain in control of how that happens without any cultural insight to offer. And there are others who designate all things Māori to the opposite end of what is seen to be high culture. Fact is, there is beauty in all forms of creative expression. There is a dignity to be found in the way in which we all express our culture. And one thing's for sure, there is no honour in assuming that the only kind of creative worth supporting is white. Thanks to all your efforts, this colonial hangover is fading. But the tendency of some of our Pākehā whānau to want to try and tell me, and mine, how to be Māori pops up still every now and again. As preposterous as that sounds, it's still an awkward conversation I have to have at least 2 or 3 times a year with well-meaning friends and colleagues. My plea to you all, e hoa mā, please don't do that. Catch yourself while it's still a thought whirring in your head, and don't let it out your mouth. No Māori will thank you for assuming the right to define who and how we are. And I think we can all agree. It's so much more than inappropriate. It's an artefact of white supremacy that we are all trying hard to let go of. So, as you can see, my thoughts are never very far from Repurua Marae, and as some of you may know, as of November last year, I took up a new role, as koka to 1.2 million mokopuna under the age of 18. The image here is of Andrew Beecroft and I on the Mahau at Tuowo with a handful of the whānau, just a few hundred. He's often told the story since then of how sitting in the context of my whānau reminded him that whānau and family are 2 very different things. We were trying hard to get a photo with everyone in it, and of course, as you can see, it was semi-organised chaos. Early in the job, when Duncan Garner asked me, how did I see myself in this commissioner role, I told him I'd just become koka to 1.2 million mokopuna. You need to understand that the framing is deliberate. As a koka, I understand how my role fits in and around whānau, hapu, iwi and the community. As in not the boss of, but champion for, kaitautoko for. The independent Crown entity that I work for has been on a journey to realise and bring to life Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and my appointment is one small step in that journey. As a wahine Māori over 50, every decision I make about where to invest my time and my energy is kaupapa driven. So when Judge Beecroft told me he wanted an assistant Māori Commissioner for Children to work in partnership with him to help him lead his organisation and be a champion for children, I was interested. He apologised for the title not being the coolest, but given the statutory settings around a commissioner's soul, it was the best he could do without changing the law. I told him that titles don't worry me too much. But when he said that he wanted to honour Te Tiriti and learn how to share power, I was in. That was the moment that I decided that this is the role for me. I hadn't expected to come across a 63-year-old Pākehā male judge who understands and accepts that the Te Tiriti relationship is a power-sharing relationship. He credits many good Māori people inside and outside the office with helping him to realise that this is where it's at. So far, our Te Tiriti power sharing experiment has been both challenging and rewarding, well, for me at least. As for Andrew, he can speak for himself. Have a listen to him reflecting on what it's like to let go of power.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Well, power sharing, letting go. What has it meant from my perspective? Starting point, it was the right thing to do. If we're genuine about treaty-based models in New Zealand, I felt there was no other alternative and I wanted to do it. Letting go, it's not as easy as I thought. I mean, it was hard. I'd worked hard with developing media style and messaging, with public messaging, personally, and it was difficult to entrust that to someone else. And for the first month or so, I did find that quite hard. But since then, I've just found that I've been so proud, in the best sense of that word, that the kaupapa of the office has been in stereo, if not triplicate. It's been great. We've had some courageous conversations. We still are, about how we can ensure that Glenys has wrapped around her the proper support for her to develop kaupapa Māori approaches within the office and in our external advocacy. On balance, I'm hugely excited by it. I think it has not just added value, it's not just the right thing to do, but we're a different office because of it. We're a better office because of it. It's exciting and it's a journey that we've begun. We've got a long way to go on. Tēnā koutou katoa.
There is still work to do, but at least we're off to a good start. Mutual respect is essential, as is trust. What matters most in a power-sharing relationship like this is a clear kaupapa. Knowing why we exist and what difference we can make, that's what drives this relationship. So, another example of Māori-led creative magic, or Māori-led creative brings magic, can be found in kaupapa, in a kaupapa which began with a series of hui in Tūranga in 2018. We got off to a relatively inauspicious start, squashed beside Tuia 250 and a veritable traffic jam of colonial narratives demanding their once in every 50 years airing. It was a huge challenge to hold space for something new when nobody seemed to be able to see past October next year. In a difficult and crowded space, in a community who had given birth and life to incredible creatives in every generation since Māui, where every other kid at the bus stop is practising their new poi, where kids get up and bust out a mihi and a waiata tautoko without a second thought, where some of our nannies still haka like patupaerehe, where country music still gathers a huge crowd, and where we have more art galleries than pubs on our main street. It was in this space that a values-led and kaupapa-driven arts festival was born. It was important from the start to invest time in exploring the values of our inaugural team. Actually, the values that we lived and breathed on a daily basis. Values that our community was already familiar with. Values that had the power to hold and give expression to our love for home. Right from the beginning, there were tohu. Ooh, there were tohu. Tohu that both guided our thinking and challenged us to let go of what may have been considered a more conventional approach to event making. Those tohu caused us to lean deeper into our connection to the whenua. I'll never forget the first time we visited a natural amphitheatre surrounded by ngahere. A whānau of Pīwaiwaka danced around us the whole time we were there. Or the first time our original team of 3 met, and how Tāwhiri Mātia knocked at the sliding door as our colleague stood up and shared his pepeha. Or how powerful it was to hear the stories of Tairāwhiti from the people who have carried those stories for generations. How our various noho as a team shaped the way we thought about everything, and how nothing was ever the same again once we knew about the atrocities that had taken place in now tranquil hills and valleys. We began to grasp all the ways in which hahaurongo were created by our tipuna, and we realised fairly quickly that authenticity really is everything. This is an image of Te Araifiti, a pathway of light, which became a place where whānau gathered and wandered and laughed and oohed and ahed together over the school holidays last year. It was okay to touch things, okay to explore. Kids were allowed to play here. Their parents didn't need to stress about their tamariki breaking things or touching things. Kids climbed trees as the Wātene Māori kept a watchful eye. People Instagrammed and Facebook Lived. They called their friends and their whānau to join them. My favourite live was a spontaneous review from the back of a Harley Davidson by a man who had met with us 6 months before and pleaded with us, asked us to make love bombs for our community. When the people of the whenua are invited to bring their vision and their work to grass-covered riverbanks like this one, it creates a vibe that is both unassuming and powerful. These atua you can see in the image were a favourite place for tamariki and mokopuna to rest, to chat with their whānau, to take in the light and shadow all around them. They are a powerful way of reclaiming our world in ways that are accessible, open, beautiful. This is but one example of mātauranga Māori in action, but of course there are many. I remember the first time I saw this theatre decked out in this visual depiction of the story of Matariki. I nearly crashed my car. Even though our community has the highest proportion of Māori people in Aotearoa, it's still very, very rare to see images such as these in the public domain. I mean, these windows are 2 stories high. This theatre has traditionally been a bastion for all things Pākehā, with nosebleed ticket prices that place the experience of these things Pākehā out of the reach of many Māori. Growing up in this community, this theatre was not a place where Māori girls like me felt welcome. You can imagine then just how powerful this was for Māori girls like me, and how important it is to reimagine all space as inclusive, as welcoming, and to make sure that the experience of these places is all about manaaki, so that the joy and the creative can be brought back to the people. So e hoa mā, now I turn to you. What kind of a creative ecology will we build together for our mokopuna, yours and mine? How will the creative sector honour te tiriti? Fun fact, it's not actually in the CNZ legislation, but hey, neither is it in the legislation of the Office of the Children's Commissioner, and that hasn't slowed us down one iota. As the slide says in black and white, it is critical that we learn to share power and let go of our old colonial habits. I could hazard a guess at what your old colonial habits might be, but you all actually know what they are. So the question is this: when will you make time to check in on yourselves and ensure that you're not perpetuating colonising behaviours? How will you honour who you are? How can this inform the way you honour the mana of others? How will you analyse the power relationships in your organisations and spaces with a view to enabling by Māori for Māori, by Samoa for Samoa, by Tonga for Tonga, by rangatahi for rangatahi? You get the drift. How will you analyse the power relations in your organisations and spaces to ensure that these approaches are properly resourced and supported on an equitable basis? How will you make space and hold space for rangatahi to bring their special kind of magic? How will you adopt an attitude of radical acceptance for the people in our community who are disabled, who are GLBTQI, and have so much creative goodness to share? How do we govern our organisations in a way that sets that expectation and trusts our leaders, because our leaders are on the kaupapa too? When will you make time to revisit the vision and the values of your organisation and chart a course for peaceful coexistence? The world is in a critical place. We are waking up from a long and terrible time of darkness and despair. In times like this, it's the leadership of creatives that is absolutely essential. E hoa mā, you are the essential workers of the āpōpō for all of our mokopuna. No one else has the emotional bandwidth to connect the people and lead us to a future where our humanity and our connection can be normalised. So, in closing, I'd like to introduce you to our mokopuna, ko Hugh tēnei. He is one of the 42nd generation of mokopuna of Māui Tikitiki Ataranga. He is hopeful that the world that he will inherit as a result of our efforts will allow him to revel in his culture and enjoy his language wherever he goes. Hugh comes from a long line of thespians and musicians, orators and activists, cooks and manaki experts. Hugh knows that what happens for him and his generation depends on the courage we have to challenge the status quo and embrace the discomfort that comes with change. So, e hoa mā, are we up for a challenge?
Kia ora, Glenys. I just wanted to, before I move on to the questions, I just wanted to share a little story. I'm so pleased you put up an image of the Te Tairāwhiti Arts Festival, because I had the privilege of taking my children to the festival last year. And for me, the barometer of success was that I didn't see them. They just completely disappeared. They felt so at home, so welcomed, that they were able to leave me and they just ran off, especially playing amongst the light sculptures, making friends with other children. So, you know, for me, that's the hugest compliment arts organisations can receive is, you know, if children feel comfortable and happy in those spaces, then we've done something well. So we have quite a few questions here, so I'll move quickly to them. One that I'm interested in is what have you found works best when you are engaging or working with rangatahi, and what's the key thing rangatahi tell you they need from organisations?
Rangatahi ask all the time, and this is in my professional context, you know, my day-to-day job, and just in the community, rangatahi ask all the time for the opportunity to lead.